Hi, everybody. On this page, it's all about inclusive education. You're going to find what the definition of inclusion is. You're going to find out what Jeffco has as core beliefs around inclusion. We're going to include a little bit of the research around inclusion. And at the bottom, you're going to see what inclusion is not. And with me today, I have my dearest niece, Kimmy. And I'm going to let Kimmy talk a little bit about what her experience is like, because Kimmy has a paraprofessional that works with her at school all day. So my first question for Kimmy is, tell us a little bit about your disability and why it requires support from a paraprofessional.
So I have spinal muscular atrophy, which is a type of muscular dystrophy, and basically it makes my muscles weaker, and that causes me to need a paraprofessional to open doors and get my stuff out of my bag and help me transfer between classes. But as far as the intellectual part of school, I don't need one. It's more just for the physical disability part of it.
Okay, so para support for physical activities at school. How long have you had para support?
Right now, I technically don't have a para because I'm doing PSEL in college, but since last year, I've had one since kindergarten. I've had a para.
So your entire school career?
Yeah.
Okay, so you already talked a little bit about how your para supports in class with getting your materials out, opening up your backpack and that kind of stuff. Intellectually, you don't need para support. Has there ever been a time when a para has over supported you?
Yeah, usually I've had since 5th grade, since I moved schools, the same para. So she never overstepped when it came to trying to help me with academic activities. But I have had subs that have stepped in and that have sat by me or whatever, and then been like, do you need help with this question? Do you need help with this question? So since then, my parents had to put in the sub notes, don't ask her about academic activities because she doesn't need any help with that.
It's just the physical stuff. Okay, so there are students where we have para support for both physical support and for intellectual support. What could you say to be the voice of students who are nonverbal? What is something that you would say that we could tell paras to kind of give them an idea of how they could help a student be independent? So how could you give a voice to those who are nonverbal? What message would you give?
Yeah, I think it depends on the disability. Of course, everyone is different. But coming from my perspective, if the goal of this whole course and just the goal of being a para in general is to be inclusive and to help that student, then I feel like learning the boundaries of that student and knowing that sometimes they could want you to back off a little bit and maybe not necessarily sit by them, because mine is all physical, it's easy for me to have a voice for myself, obviously. So with my para, there was an awkward time where I had to be I don't actually want you in my classroom because I want to be just a student just like everybody else. And my mom was talking about it because we were just going back and forth because I had a hard time with the school and getting my ideas towards them. But my mom kind of gave the analogy of think of you at work and think of your mom following you around. It's a little bit kind of like that, not fully, of course, but just knowing that this, trying to make the student as independent as possible.
You made me think of two things. The first one is that we call our para support in Jeffco ISP, where it stands for independent support para, so that we're trying to get our students to be as independent as possible. And the second thing that you make me think of is having your mom with you all day at school and what that can do to friendships. And you can't be your authentic self trying to make friends with people if you've got an adult stuck to you. So, you know, I think you had told me that story before of hey lady, I'm trying to make a friend right now, or I'm trying to have a conversation with a friend right now that I wouldn't be telling in front of another adult. It really takes that authenticity away from a true friendship. So that's a great point.
The time between 8th grade and high school, was like that transition time that I like really had to stand up, because my school didn't value my independence as much as it seems like Jeffco does. And so I really had to fight for my independence. And there was a time when that transition really happened and I finally got her out of my classroom. Like, I love my para. I just like needed that independence. And I finally got her out of my classroom and like finally won over the school's argument. And my friends were like, "You're kind of a different person when she's not in the room." And it's not like I randomly just start talking about bad stuff or whatever. It's just I feel like I can be my teenager self.
Yes, and I would say that kids would all agree with that, that we change our behavior when we know that an adult isn't around us. So that's interesting
Yeah.
that you just said I had to fight for my independence. What do you think a student who is nonverbal would do to quote unquote fight for their independence if they didn't have the
Yeah.
voice?
Yeah, I can't imagine. That would be so difficult. Um, I don't even know what that would look like, honestly. I feel like just to avoid that would be making independence the front of it and just going in with that expectation.
Yeah, something to think about
Yeah.
is what would kids do if they didn't have a voice, but they were advocating for more independence?
Yeah.
I know what I think the answer is, but for the participants in this class, I will leave that open-ended and let them try to think about what students who are nonverbal might do or who have limited verbal skills.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess one last question. Is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you would have for tips for adults or paras who are working in the classrooms with students who have disabilities, whether they're intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities or both?
Yeah, I think this doesn't necessarily apply to the nonverbal students, but it could. But communication is key. Like, I found that the most struggle that I had with my para, like I said, I love my para. She's one of my favorite people ever. But we did have a time where it was like really, really awkward. And like that time when I was like trying to fight for my independence, but also like trying to love my para well. And like communication is key, and just knowing that like if your student does want independence, it's not personal. Like, because it wasn't like I want Shelly out of my classroom. It was like I just want to be independent, you know? So I think communication is huge when it comes to that.
Such a good point. It is such a good point. I mean, because we say communication is key in all relationships. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that you highlighted that. Okay, so I think that's it for today. I do really appreciate your time. You are the bomb diggity.
Yeah.
I hope that you know that. And I'm hoping that your interview today will really help open the eyes of people who provide support for kids in the classroom. So thank you, Kimmy. Till we meet again.
Yes.